Let's start off by welcoming the other half of the ACO partnership. Lily Ellis is going to join our next panel, along with Deborah Cairns-Stoll from Cool Shropshire and E4 Environment. We've got Simon Helmer from Pro Enviro and Neil Dady from Evora Edge. Let's say hello to them all. Excellent. One microphone between two until we need to steal one for audience questions. That's basically how we'll work. Lily, let me start with you. So, as the other half of the team, the one thing that was mentioned in Ryan's presentation there is the communicate and collaborate side of things. How has that worked? How has that played out? What did you have to actually do, and how difficult was it?
I'd say it's interesting. People are always interesting because you never know what they're going to come out with. So for us, we needed to make sure that everyone knew what we knew. So it was a formal launch of the programme, everyone in the company in the same place at the same time, which really means you need the buy-in from the top, which I'm sure everyone knows is really important. Our managing director, Neil, is very passionate and allowed us to do that. Following a formal presentation where you don't really know if everyone's listening, they could be on their phones, checking their emails, and things like that, we made sure we would put departments in front of us, asking them questions. Do you understand what we've just told you? And if you don't, that's fine. Tell us why. What don't you understand? What do you think we haven't included? Like Brian said, we're not experts, and it's important that people feel like they can get their say in what sustainability should look like in the business that they work for. And if we haven't done our jobs, what do we need to do? And do you have any suggestions for what else we can be doing? Because there's always more. We're doing a lot at ACO because we have the resources, but it always feels like we're not doing enough. And I think it's important to keep that mindset, because we could easily sit back and say, yeah, we put solar panels up, we're all good. We've done more than that business, but you're not going to take anyone with you then. You have to make sure you're always innovating and thinking and driving it forward, and then the people should come along with you. It's challenging, but we're quite lucky that we do have an engaging workforce, and they're always happy to get stuck in and just listen, really, which is great.
Excellent. Neil, tell us a little bit more about you, Evora Edge, because you've got fingers in various pies in this field, haven't you, really? Is that fair to say?
If you say so, Carl.
I do.
Evora Edge, I think we describe ourselves now as a tech-enabled, technical asset management consultancy, whatever that means.
If that isn't fingers in lots of pies, I don't know what is.
So what we do is manage properties for real estate investment funds, real estate investment trusts, your pension funds who have got multiple buildings across the country, commercial offices, warehouses, shopping centres. And we look at those buildings from a technical asset management perspective in terms of their mechanical services, their building services, the things that consume energy. And we model buildings, dynamic simulation modelling of a building. So we'll take a building, we'll reconstruct that building in our software, and we'll look where the building is now, look where the building needs to be on a net zero carbon journey. And we've said a lot about net zero carbon this morning. What is net zero carbon? Well, actually, I don't think anybody's going to achieve net zero carbon, but what we're all going to do is go on a journey towards it. And what does that really mean? Energy use intensity, how much kilowatts per metre squared is your building absorbing? That's your target. Where are you now? And what do you need to get to? And why do you need to get to it? And actually the reality of that situation is that I don't think there's any business that I've ever been in that wants to spend more than they earn. So it's basic economics. Make your cost as low as possible. Make your sales as high as possible. Make your margin as big as possible. It's basic economics around net zero carbon, energy saving, managing what you do day to day. And what we do is focused on energy efficiency, but actually focused on the whole performance life cycle of that building, what happens in the next 5 years, the next 10 years. And the benefit we have with investment funds is they are looking 15, 20 years on when they buy a building. They're buying the building for the long term. So they might have multiple tenants that come and go, but actually they're in that building for the long term. So how do they manage that building, transition that building towards net zero carbon? Where's the financial pinch points in that journey? They might have gas boilers that they installed 2 years ago, so there's 20 years of life left in a gas boiler. how do we manage that building, that interim period until we get to the point where we're going to change the gas boiler and put something else in? And what's the decision-making process that informs us in that journey? Because the decisions we make now, the phone call this afternoon might be a building with a gas boiler that's fallen over. The immediate action to get that building warm again is to change the boiler. Like for like, get it done, problem's gone away. But actually, what's the best thing for the building in the longer term? How do we transition that building? And that's what we do as a consultancy. It's interesting. I mean, when I started doing energy surveys 20 years ago, I was quite enthusiastic about behavioural change and talking to people and explaining to them how they could change their behaviours to save energy. I think I've transitioned into the grumpy old man phase now, so I go around looking at lights turned on and wonder why the lights are on, etc. I look in this room and I look around the corner there and wonder why those lights are on over there. And behavioural change, and we've gone through an interesting phase now, because domestically we've all had to think about how we're consuming energy because our bills have gone up. But actually the reverse of that now is that people are coming back into the office environment and wanting to turn the heating up because they're sitting at home with their jumpers and things on. I want to be in a comfortable environment. Let the company look after me. So that change has come, and we're seeing the transition of people coming back into the workplace as well now, whereas before people were happy to be at home after the COVID epidemic. Now people have wanted to come back into the office environment. They wanted to come back into a comfortable environment. And we're seeing that transition and the behavioural change that we need to all build on. I used to say that I could save an office. I did work with Wrekin Housing Group. When I first went in there, I said I could save 20% on their energy cost on their head office building in Telford by behavioural change alone. And that was achieved over time. Now I would say that we could still go into a large commercial building and save 10% on energy costs just by behavioural change, just by getting people. You don't leave a tap running, don't leave the lights on. It's basic stuff.
Well, I know that the team from ACO, is saying, look, we're not experts, we're learning as we go along. But if you're looking to project forward potentially the life cycle of a building, say 20 years, you do have to be pretty well informed experts in your field, don't you?
And we are future gazing. A lot of the time we are future gazing.
And given how fast this sector's moving, that's tough.
Massively quickly. Solar battery storage is I think the step change, almost the industrial revolution of our generation, or the younger generation, not my generation, but the younger generation. They will in what, 5 years time, battery storage will be taking people off grid. And it'll be a massive change to some.
Deb, Kevin gave you the big build-up about half an hour ago, saying you've got to hear from Cool Shropshire. You've got to speak to Cool Shropshire. Tell us all about it.
Thank you, and thanks, Kev. Cool Shropshire, I'm going to look across to Adrian here, and also ACO. Cool Shropshire is targeted at your small and micro businesses who really want to do something sustainable, but haven't got the technical expertise within the company. Shropshire has got thousands of small and micro businesses. They're just as keen as ACO to do something, but haven't necessarily got the resources or the expertise. So Cool Shropshire is a software platform that is free at the point of access. I repeat that, free at the point of access. Thank you, Shropshire Council, where businesses can go on, say a little bit about themselves, and so understand what the legal requirements that they have as a business are. It continually scares me how many businesses don't know what they should do with their waste, for example. But then the neat bit, I think, is that businesses can then go on and do some goal setting. So they say what they're doing now, they say what they want to do going forward, and this is around energy, reduce their energy consumption. It's also around waste, how they buy things, biodiversity, and the platform will actually provide you with an action plan. And rather than just, we're going to reduce energy, we've actually auto-filled some specific actions that businesses can take. So you get a start point to say, oh, right, yes, we could do that. So for each action that you say we're going to reduce our waste, there's specific things that you can do. It's not just an ambition, it's specific actions. So that smaller businesses are set on the road. I'm just going to say now, thank you for, again, heralding around carbon footprinting. Carbon footprinting is very often a shorthand for, are you doing something? Right? So we can give advice around carbon footprinting, how to do it, but importantly also whether to do it. Is it useful for you? And also, how much energy do you put into gathering a figure which is 42? Yippee. What does that mean for anybody? So we try within the tool and the supporting resource pack to give some information to people that is actually helpful to them so that they can have an informed conversation with people who are putting tenders together. ACO, for example, I know you try and buy local, but actually what you're saying is also you want to work with ethical companies who are looking at net zero, who are trying to do something sustainable. But very probably those small local companies haven't got an environmental policy, a sustainability policy, net zero. So the Cool Shropshire platform actually enables Shropshire businesses to understand what they're doing, have an action plan, and genuinely say to ACO, yes, we could be one of your suppliers. So it's really circular within Shropshire to try and really drive the net zero agenda. And it's free at the point of access. So,
And Deb, does part of that as well, the need for that, come from something that Ryan touched on earlier, the fact that potentially there's information overload out there, and if a company knows that they need to start, it's not always obvious what the first bit needs to be.
absolutely, yeah, Carl. There are so many sources of information out there of carbon footprinting. What is it? Somebody told me that they looked into carbon footprinting and the guide that they received was 1,000 pages. Yikes. But also what we try and do with the resource pack that we've got is we will point businesses to the Shropshire guidance, to the Telford guidance if you're in Telford, to the BEAT programme, to March's LEP, so that we actually try and contain rather than give different sources. So it is a singular access point. Yeah.
Let's bring Simon in. Simon's brought his notes with him, so he must have lots to say here. So just tell us a bit about you and your organisation.
I think I should have brought my sunglasses as well with these TV lights.
Pressure of Hollywood, see.
So yeah, ProEnviro, we're an energy and carbon management consultancy. We basically help organisations develop their sort of low carbon strategies, but also work with them over the longer term to help deliver them and achieve tangible savings and results, rather than just being at the front end. We've been in existence for 30 years, so we've got quite a broad experience. Our bread and butter is probably manufacturing organisations, but saying that, we've worked with a whole huge range of organisations and companies, from dealing with quite small SMEs, perhaps through the BEAT programme that we've been heavily involved in delivering, through to sort of very sort of large-scale area-based strategy projects like repowering the Black Country. So yeah, where to start? I think one of the key things is to iterate that measuring and sort of monitoring is very important, and it doesn't have to be sort of a fancy piece of software. It could be literally just taking regular gas and electricity meter readings or recording your fuel usage, because so many companies that we go to, they you look if they've got sort of monthly meter readings. So for a resource you're actually paying for based on a quantity, it's kind of not good practice to not be measuring it. Sort of you wouldn't not record how many sort of tons of steel you've got in the yard for your your raw material quantities. So why would you do it for energy? So yeah, that kind of monitoring and measuring is a very important first step, because then you can actually, when you do put savings measures in place, you can actually see what it achieves. And also, you can compare it to some kind of useful metric. So like a business metric, perhaps turnover of the organisation, or number of widgets shipped, something that sort of relates to the business activity rather than just, I mean, it is good to record absolute values as well, but pick a metric that's actually sort of useful to the business.
So when you say you work with businesses, how practically does it work? Is it the first thing, is it site visit? Is it
Yes.
Do you ask people, so, what are you trying to achieve here? What are your objectives? Or
I mean, it varies for each client, but there's the first bit really is go in and understand what they're about and where they're using energy and where their sort of carbon emissions are lying, and then it's coming up with a plan of what they could do to, sort of to mitigate that and reduce that. And it all depends on the clients, what expertise they've got in house. Some clients will just then go off and do it themselves and implement stuff. Others, perhaps we provide monitoring facilities. We do have fancy software that can do that if you want to go down that path. Or it can be sort of, helping them through the process, project management, helping them to sort of find contractors, sort of specify what the contractors are going to do and, sort of manage that process. And like a lot of providers, if you do a good job, you end up sort of having quite a long-term relationship with some of those clients because, you've tangibly saved them money and given them some, other business benefits. So they sort of stick with you and, maybe you do the next bit and the next bit because it might be you're starting off doing the sort of low cost or relatively low cost energy efficiency type stuff. And then you're sort of progressing on to things like putting a big PV array on top of your factory. Like people have mentioned many times, it is a journey, this. And that's perhaps another point to make. Try and make a bit of a longer term plan, maybe sort of 3 to 5 years. Because there's things that you might want to do now from a sort of low carbon and sustainability point of view, but they're not quite viable yet at this moment in time. So you may be thinking, let's keep that in our locker kind of thing and look at it every year and see if the incentives have changed. So I'm particularly thinking about people going from like gas boilers to heat pumps. That's not really there as a sort of financial case at the moment because of this differential between the cost of electricity and the cost per unit of energy of gas. But if that changes, then obviously that will become a lot more attractive, or it becomes mandatory, which that's probably going to be one of the drivers that comes down the line. So try and have a sort of a bit of a look forward as to what things may become viable in the future, or maybe a risk factor to the business in terms of sort of new legislation comes along and it's something you've got to respond to. Because if you're already sort of looking at it and thinking about it, you're sort of a couple of steps ahead of the game when it comes to actually having to do that. Maybe I should let somebody else have a go. But
let me come back to Lily actually from the ACO perspective, because I wonder whether it's important once you start out on this journey to focus on the things where you can have not quick wins or easy wins, but wins that are more visible to people, just so it encourages people that this really does work. Is that the way you look at it? Do you start with the things where you can show how effective it can be?
I think it's a difficult one really, because you do want to be seen, especially as a company like us. We've made a statement. We don't want to say we're going to be net zero by 2030 and then just do all the background things, because you can be seen as greenwashing, which nobody wants. But you should also not be doing things to tell people you're doing things, because it's not a tick box exercise. It might be for some businesses, but for us it's because we should be doing it and it's the right thing to do. So it's good to have a mixture. We don't talk about absolutely everything that we do, because you can only send out a newsletter so large that people will read. But also it's getting other businesses involved, such as the business growth roadshows that we did. Because like Deb said, we want to make sure that we're supporting local, and it's to find the line between supporting local and supporting sustainable businesses, which is really difficult. So if we're not bringing other businesses on board with us, and we're just kind of trailblazing ahead and saying we're doing this, we're doing that, you're not, ha ha ha. That's not a very good image, and we don't want to be seen like that. We want to be seen as supporting our community, supporting Shropshire, and getting involved. So whether that's bringing other businesses to our, like Ryan said, to our building and talking to them for an hour. We're not going to put that on social media. But then we'll also when we put our solar panels on the roof, we did put that on social media. So it's difficult. I think it's just something you have to kind of do day by day. But for smaller businesses, I would say shout about what you're doing. if you're investing and you're doing these projects and you're going out and planting trees, doing some volunteering, tell people about it, because you should be, and you should be recognised for this great work that you're doing, especially SMEs that, you know, are doing it because you think it's the right thing to do, not necessarily because you have the time or the money to do it, which is fantastic. And there are so many unsung heroes, I would say, in this field that go unnoticed.
But also because some of the spin-off benefits, as we said earlier, is that
Huge,
you may
yeah.
well become an approved and recognised supplier for a larger company because they didn't realise that that was your policy in the first place. Neil, just coming over to you, is there a sort of shopping list of common pitfalls or things that people typically overlook, or is there a first place you always would go with a project thinking, I bet they haven't thought about this?
I think the short answer to that is no, and I think that SMEs sometimes are victims of the next best salesman that comes through the door. So whether it be the solar panel salesman, the heat pump salesman, whoever comes through the door and convinces you that that's a really good thing to do for your business and you've got a bit of money and you want to do something. So there is that danger of not necessarily picking the right thing for the holistic benefit of your business or your property, but actually taking that next best salesman approach. So I think you do need to stand back. There is an awful lot of information out there. There's an awful lot of different ways in which you can go on your journey towards NZC and better management of your property. So I think you need to stand back. I would say talk to a consultant, but that would be me selling consultancy services. There are risks involved, as you mentioned there, picking the right size EV chargers, making sure your building is right. It's an easy thing to roll out LED panels across a building, but actually that does affect or potentially affect some of your switchgear within your building. So if you've got a large commercial property, there are risks around whatever you do as well as benefits. So you do need to think that whole process through. This isn't, behavioural change is the first thing. That's the first step, and then start to look for the small wins, the small gains. I really like what you've just said there about promoting what people do, because we also, recruitment's a challenge. Recruitment, retention of people. People actually do want to work in an environment where the company is doing things for the greater good, and that's really important. They don't want to work for a business where the profit's being taken out on fast cars and yachts and planes. They want to work for a company that's doing the greater good.
I'll perhaps ask this question of the three of you, starting with you, Neil. Are there some myths that need busting in this area? Are there things that people misunderstand, or are there barriers that don't actually exist that people think, they're actually putting them off moving more quickly than perhaps they should do?
I think there's a lot of complicated regulation or myths around regulation, feed-in tariffs, return on investments. I think there's a lot of cloud around that people struggle to see their way through, work their way through. If you're going to put a heat pump in, is it more efficient than a gas boiler? Is the upfront cost? What's the payback period? It all starts to become a little bit complicated for people to work their way through that.
And how do people know which particular expert to ask about each one of these things?
Indeed.
Is another thing, isn't it?
Indeed. So that it's that, not so much myths, but it's the blur of information that's out there, and finding the right advice. So certainly companies like Cool Shropshire that are dealing specifically with SMEs, it's really important that they're there to give that advice.
Where are you, Deb, on this one in terms of potential misconceptions or myths that you need to bust?
I think the main one has been busted, really, is that sustainability is premium priced. There is still some of that out there, that buying recycled goods actually costs you more, buying green energy costs you more. So being a sustainable company has a premium on it. Increasingly that is being broken now, by demand for people, for recycled products, etc. That the price, it's simple economic supply and demand. But also now people are recognising that there's a synergy. It's not a binary debate. It's a synergy between reducing your energy consumption and saving costs. So I think that big myth around being a sustainable company will cost me money. I think that one is the one that we are continually trying to break, but actually we're being helped by outside on that one as well. So
Do a lot of businesses talk to you about, look, right, how quickly am I going to get a return on my investment then? Is that a big thing?
and reasonably so, yes, and that depends on what action they want to take. And my starting point, I was talking to a colleague earlier, there's very little point in being green and broke when it comes to a company. So it's a really reasonable question to ask and really important one. And in the legislation, ESOS, they're talking about payback periods, etc. So there is a reasonableness in that. And I would always, in things that we're talking to companies about, actually have that in the back of my mind. You know, what's the payback and what's important to the company? Yeah.
And Simon, do you think is one of the fallouts from the inflationary world that we live in at the moment, the fact that potentially you can get a return on investment more quickly than you maybe would have done a few years ago? Or is that too simplistic?
Well, I always advise clients to be quite cautious around that, because they might be paying a really high price for, you know, gas or electricity now, but hopefully it's maybe not going to last more than a year, you know, because basically they're completely unsustainable, some of the prices that some businesses are paying. So I'm always sort of caution them, you know, you might get that kind of quick bite on the payback the first year or so, but then maybe take a more sort of historically typical price level to sort of look at the payback over the longer term, you know, because you don't want to, you know, expect to get payback in sort of, you know, 2 or 3 years, when actually in reality it's going to be, you know, that's more like 5. So take a view on what the kind of medium-term energy price is going to be, rather than just saying, oh, that's the price we're paying today, so the payback is, you know, that divided by the capital cost. That's a big one. I'm always sort of, because clearly people selling the kit are going to say, oh, you know, that's going to pay back in 2 years, and it you know, perhaps will if there's you know, pound per kilowatt hour electricity is you're going to be paying that for 2 years, but chances are, you know, a lot of businesses will fold if these high energy prices are sustained for, you know, much longer. I mean, it is a business killer. It's a very, very serious issue.
So last question from me then, before we open the floor up to questions, and I'll ask it of all of you. Is there one particular main barrier which you think needs to be broken down to just start some dialogue to reach? Is there something that's stopping you reaching some of these businesses at the moment?
Well, we're really, really busy working with these businesses, so we are reaching a lot of
Share
businesses.
your top tips in that case, is what I'm saying.
I mean, obviously the high energy prices really stimulated engagement with this issue, but it was already starting to happen before that, more from a sustainability point of view. People wanted to be more sustainable, so I would say that was sort of picking up in the last, you know, maybe sort of 3 years, and then it's sort of been given rocket boosters by the energy prices in the last, you know, sort of 12 to 18 months. So I don't know. I mean, a lot of the time it's people have got the day job to do. You know, because I personally have dealt with a lot of sort of small, medium-sized companies. You know, the large companies, they've got people they can assign to it and to do it full time. But it's these smaller companies where, you know, they're running the business. That's what's taking their time and getting whatever product and service it is they provide out the door. So they've got quite limited time to, you know, devote to actually doing this. So I think anything where, so like programs like Beat, where you're providing an independent advisor, you know, that can help them perhaps get over those first few steps. Because people often cite money as an issue, and obviously money can be an issue, but you tend to find that businesses, if there is a genuine opportunity there and they can see it and they understand it and they've got confidence in the benefits can deliver, then they get on with it, they do it, they find a way, you know, they find a way to finance it, or they find the right, you know, people resource to do it. But it's perhaps that earlier stage when it's more speculative. You know, they haven't got time to speculatively, you know, devote time to looking at a what if. It's once it becomes more of a, yeah, this is a genuine opportunity, let's, you know, now move it forward.
And I mean, should you say, you mentioned the BEEP programme a couple of times. That's coming to an end very soon, isn't it? And
Yeah,
what's
it's
replacing it? Is the same support available in a different form? Is it repackaged, is it? Or?
You'll have to ask our public sector colleagues about that. We're a humble deliverer of the service. But yeah, my understanding is, I mean, we know that the various LEPs and local authorities have bid in for funding, so there is going to be something coming along, but I can't really answer what it might be. Tim's laughing.
pass over to Deb.
because he
So-
probably knows.
So Deb, barriers to sort of start dialogue from your point of view?
I think a barrier is, heck, what do I do? And that's really where the Cool Shropshire comes in. But also, from the motivation point of view, is if it's business to business, then let people know that you're doing something. So having that action plan. If it's B2C, then use a logo or whatever to say that you're doing something. Because there's a huge demand, the number of people who will just look at a website and look for sustainability or something. They won't read the policy, but they want to know if you're doing something. So I think one of the barriers is trying to do things rather than just telling people. Mark what I said earlier about greenwashing and the CMA, but having some background there just to do something and to let it be known that you're doing something, I think.
Neil?
I'd go bigger picture. I think that the big barrier is the linking of electricity prices to the cost of gas. And if we can break that link and let electricity find its natural price as opposed to being underpinned by the price of gas and the production of electricity, we can bring the price of electricity down, which starts to make the return on investment for domestic heat pumps and everything else become much more manageable. So it's that big picture that's change.
I think we all say yes to that one, don't we? And Lily, I guess from your point of view, I'd ask it slightly differently. Are there any particular barriers that you felt you had to overcome in the early stages when you first went on this journey?
There's a lot, definitely. I think, yeah, just being aware of what's going on. I mean, anytime I walk in a room, I'm normally the youngest person in the room, not to shade
I've quite the
anybody.
opposite. Quite the opposite for me, to be honest.
And I think that can come with a lot of misconceptions and, you know, first impressions and things like that on some people. So I think it's just being open to the next generation. I talk to kids about sustainability and they throw out words like biodiversity and greenhouse gases. And I'm like, oh my God, how do you know these words? I knew these words like a year ago. So I think it's, just don't not listen to people. And I think there is a tendency for certain people to do that. And it's just, breaking those barriers is really important because some things I learned from 7-year-olds is absolutely fantastic. But then some things I learn from gentlemen such as yourself, it's also fantastic.
Old
so
people, I mean, yeah.
not old people, well-established people in their careers. So I think it's, be open, listen. We try and do a lot of listening, and then we try and do a lot of talking to people and giving advice as well. So I think you definitely have to come from both angles.
Excellent. Has anybody got any questions for our young panel members? We'll bring a microphone out to you if anybody has. Looks like Adrian has. Go on, steal a microphone, Adrian, go on.
Thank you. I was just going to ask the question really, I think it'd be really interesting to understand, it's been mentioned several times this morning, but around the supply chain piece, and just be interested to know whether either you have experienced this yourself or whether you've had clients where the driver to engage with this agenda is not just, I think Simon referenced this, it's a longer term piece rather than just the current energy challenge. How much of that is being driven by clients setting expectations, either very clearly in a procurement sense or more unspecified, as we want to see what your policy is on this because we want to engage with companies who have that kind of ethos?
Adrian, I could probably take that at the investment fund level, commercial properties, office blocks, warehouses, shopping centres, as well as managing energy. They're also securing the value of the asset. So the journey to net zero carbon is as much about securing the asset value as it is about that energy saving and that return on investment. So that's an important driver, but it's also an important driver that flows all the way through the chain, as it were. So tenants no longer want to come into an E-rated EPC building. They want to come into an A or a B-rated EPC building. And that's a driver because then they get more pounds per square metre lettable value out of that property, securing the asset value. So at that top level, at that fund level, where they're spending hundreds of millions of pounds on going green, they're doing it for some very hard commercial reasons now, and that's a massive driver in our end of the marketplace. That's making those decisions where heat pump, take out your gas boiler, put a heat pump in, put solar panels on, may not stack up on a return on investment, but it's securing the property value, and it is also driving the rental values on these properties, so it's a huge driver.
Anybody else want to have a say on that one?
Yeah, it's a powerful driver, particularly sort of when your customer basically puts demands on you. We've seen it quite a lot in the food sector where people are supplying supermarkets. So the big supermarkets are, pushing down requirements to not only, reduce carbon emissions, but also be very clearly better show, measure progress and substantiate it, not just the sort of the good old greenwash. So that's stimulated a lot of activity in that sector in particular. And you can only imagine similar things will start to happen more and more in other sectors. Because it's one of those classic things, suddenly your big client decides the supply chain's got to have ISO 50001, for instance, the energy management standard, and you're not there sort of thinking about, is this worth it? Your biggest client's asking to do it. You just get on with it, don't you? You don't go through all the sort of big questioning process. You want to carry on doing business with that client, so you sort of get on with it and find a way of doing it.
Do then, Deb, maybe just following up on that, a lot of companies at the moment look at it as a competitive advantage rather than something as a necessary
Hugely so.
exercise.
Hugely so. Being able to, if you've got two companies, same price, if you've got the choice of buying from one with sustainable credentials, which are evidence behind them, versus a company which isn't doing anything, it's not on their agenda, where will you buy from? You'll buy from the green one. And that's it coming down. Coming up, the Co-op do a sustainability research questionnaire or survey annually, and their figures show the percentage of people who actively boycott companies who are not sustainable is going up. So that's companies, that's customers that you won't even see if you're not doing it. So very much it's coming down on the business supply chain, but it's also coming up from customers on the front line. So it's really important, that supply chain bit.
Any more questions? Anybody else got any questions? One over here. Where's the microphone? Here we go. It's coming. I know we'd be able to hear you anyway, Mark, but the viewers need to hear you. So.
One for you, Neil, actually. You mentioned gas, and obviously gas is fossil fuel. We've got to stop burning this fossil fuel just from a sustainability point of view. I know it's cheap, but we actually burn about 50% gas to make electricity, coming back into, solar PV and all the other stuff. So as much as gas is cheap, it's short-term thinking that we should even be talking gas. So yes, it's 13 pence compared to 38 pence, but the electricity market, I don't see it going down. I think it will stabilise, but I think we're going to be around that 38 pence a kilowatt going forward. We're never going to see the 17, 21 pence, and I think this is like your Co-op solar, and where you can fix that for 20 years at 20 pence a kilowatt. I do see it, but I don't see those energy prices coming down, and the standing charge is horrendous. I don't mind paying for electricity or gas, but it's that standing charges from obviously the Ofgem regulators. It's a bit crucial. But do remember, around all this is job creation for the UK. So instead of oil tankers coming up to Milford Haven, this is actually creating absolutely fantastic sustainable jobs for the UK. As we go to this road to net zero, what an opportunity that we create our manufacturing back again. So I think it's a big key message as well. As we go on this journey, we actually are creating the next jobs for the next 50, 60 years. Sorry, Neil, I was coming back to your gas one.
I don't think that was a question.
No, I was just saying, when you talk about gas, and we don't need gas. We've got to get rid of gas.
It's the disconnection of gas.
It is,
removal of
yeah.
gas. I mean, I think hydrogen might have something to play in this picture. We're going to need hydrogen, heavy transport, heavy manufacturing. He's going to need a gas-based fuel, and hydrogen's going to be part of that equation. But everything's going to make this picture up, isn't it? except for fossil fuels.
It's funny, I'd just written down the word hydrogen when they were saying that question mark, just to say, because it's one thing we haven't really talked about today at all, and it just highlights just how quickly this whole environment is moving, doesn't it?
Yeah, we're going to see hydrogen in heavy transport. I mean, Mark alluded to buses running on electric. I think buses will predominantly run on hydrogen once. But there's a whole infrastructure that's got to be built and jobs to develop that market.
Any more questions, folks? Anybody else? One more on the front row here.
Hi. Sorry, hi, yeah. So I'm Tim Smith. I work for Shropshire Council. I work with Adrian, Matt and various others here. One of the things that I'm really excited about, and it touches on what Lily was saying, also touches on what Mark was saying, is around skills. I think that the workforce needs and the skills needs from what we're saying here today are really evident to us all. And I think that part of our role actually at the council is sort of linking up schools and the colleges and the universities where there are already excited, young people who think we really want to not just understand what we can do for the future, but actually we want to see a role for ourselves and an opportunity. So I suppose it's a comment really to say that the skills element's really, really important for us to how can we take the story or a skills pathway or a curriculum and skills pathway, how can we show somebody at year 7 or 8 that there's an opportunity here in an area of interest and there's a pathway through education and a place to learn, but also a business to land in that's really good. Now what that does is it sort of changes how careers events and how information gets into schools, and quite frankly schools need that help. So I was just thinking from a collective point of view and a panel point of view, we've talked a lot about people from a consultancy point of view, people who are providers, people who support businesses, but how can we do more with schools, local schools? What could ACO do as an example in your area to connect more and support those schools with those messages? So that's just a thought. I mean, how could we work collectively on that? What's your views?
Lily, you spend, as part of your community remit, you spend quite a lot of time in schools, talking to people at schools, don't you?
Yeah, so we do a lot with schools, a lot on careers in general, but now going into the role of sustainability more from an internal role, obviously, like myself and Ryan has. I'm doing a level 4 apprenticeship in corporate responsibility and sustainability, which I haven't mentioned, but I talk about that with students because it's the only entry level way now, and it's only existed for 12-ish months, to get into sustainability within, and consultants are also doing this qualification in a bit of a different way, and I think there's about 114 of us in the country because it's still fairly new. This didn't exist before. It didn't exist when I started my role. I found it and was like, I'll absolutely do that. So it is making sure students are aware about these things. We've been talking about apprenticeships for so long. They still hold a stigma. So it's still, working against that. But then also just making children passionate about these things. They learn about it in school and it's not scaring them, not using fear-mongering tactics, but we invite them to our premises and we give them a tour, and just like we would if an adult came, and we get them to do environmental projects and redesign our product. How would you make it sustainable? What packaging are you going to use? And then they'll present it at the end of the day. And I'm talking Key Stage 2 and 3, and they love it. They love it. And I think it's just, if more businesses can do things like that, and then also go to their careers fairs and just talk about their role, because kids have no idea what they want to do when they're older. So why not tell them this is something to do, and it's really interesting. And we're always trying to get other businesses to support education in that way. The Marches Careers Hub, great people. I'm an enterprise advisor myself, so working with schools a lot, and they want these things. They're asking for them, but they don't know the businesses who will provide it. Because, like we said, time is such, it's really difficult for businesses to do sustainability, let alone talk to kids about it, and then go to careers fairs and invite kids to their offices. So yeah, it's just step by step. But yeah, if anybody wants to ever get involved with careers and sustainability, let me know.
But it's part of the government's agenda, this as well, at the moment, isn't it? Through things like the local skills improvement plans and things like that, to try and create a closer link partnership between education and business. And Deb, this is part of it, isn't it?
Very much so. When we're Some of it is people don't know what they don't know, so they don't know what questions to ask. So we're actually working with a college at the moment to develop, it's 3 modules around anaerobic digestion and the use of that as an energy and a fertilizer and cost savings, etc. Because a lot of people, and that's for students, but also for the agricultural community. So that is, older farmers, etc. To try and upskill, but upskill from an understanding perspective at the start, to then go on and actually learn the detail of it, about the generation of what sort of energy are we after, gas to grid, electricity, etc. So some of it is understanding what people don't know, to what questions are they asking in schools if they don't even know about what AD and even more acronyms, DESIR and HACCP and any more of those. So yeah.
I think, like most people, the biggest restriction to our growth as a business is recruitment. We can't get the people to deliver the work, and that restricts our growth. I'm a big advocate of apprenticeships. I came off of the tools. I started as a refrigeration engineer and worked my way through to consultancy. I think there's a bit of a myth in the consultancy world that you need a degree to be a consultant. I think the apprenticeship route should be strengthened. I think it's the quickest way to get people to be into the workplace and be useful in the workplace, is the apprenticeship route.
Simon, have the last word for us on this one then.
I think anything that kind of improves the engagement between education more broadly, not just schools, but also further education in universities, is a good thing, because, I think historically people have been coming out of the various education points not necessarily with the skills that businesses actually want. Apart from reading, writing and doing sums, which the education sector taught me up to degree level, everything useful I learned other than that is basically I've learned in work, doing job. So it'd be great if people could learn that stuff a bit sooner. I'm particularly thinking about sort of problem solving around, thinking around issues and working stuff out. People being innovative, because people are really innovative if you kind of set them along that path. And I think the other thing about people having the right skills, I think if you give greater certainty about how many of these technologies we need to deliver over a certain sort of time frame, businesses can have more confidence to sort of invest the time and potentially money and engagement with various institutions that might provide the skilled people. They can do that knowing they've got confidence that, say we're going to deliver X number of heat pumps per year, and that's definitely going to happen, and this is how it's going to happen. Then people are innovative and they find a way of doing it. But at the moment, we're in a situation where we know there's this massive job we've got to do over the next several decades, but it's not sort of planned out in a sort of timetable. So it's like we know we're going to need these skills, but we're not quite sure exactly when. And so you can't really invest the money and the effort to sort of training people up, getting all ready to deliver a certain type of technology, and then there's a gap of 2 years before it actually starts being delivered because the right pricing structures around energy aren't there, or the right incentives aren't there, or I think certainty and planning stuff out is a great empowerer, because then people will find a way to do it. People are innovative. They will come up with the goods, but if they don't think it's definitely going to happen, they're going to sit on their hands. So,
absolutely. Time for one more question. If anybody else has got one to finish us off. I think we've probably reached the natural conclusion, haven't we? Well, can we say a big thanks to our second panel then? To Deb, to Lily, to Simon and to Neil. I'm going to have a comfy chair instead.